Recently, I had the pleasure of doing a remote interview with Brock Tinsley and Ian Nichols from Double Experience. I've known Brock and Ian for quite a while, and I've watched them steadily establish themselves as they've built their careers in the music business. Not only are they fantastic musicians, but they're great guys, and we had a really interesting chat. So, let's listen in on my talk with Brock Tinsley and Ian Nichols from Double Experience.
Welcome to the S2E2 Show. These are insights and commentary on the music and musicians that shape our lives. And now, let's go back to class with your host, Tony Stewart.
Okay, I'm here with Brock Tinsley and Ian Nichols from Double Experience. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining me today. This is really awesome that you're doing this.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess, maybe we should just deal with the elephant in the room first and talk about how you're doing, because I know you guys were pretty busy and all of a sudden it's full stop. So maybe you want to just talk about that, like what you're up to right before the pandemic hit, and then how you're coping now. We might as well just deal with that now and get it over with.
Sure. So for the last year and a half, 2 years almost, Brock and I have been working on a record, and all of that work has been culminating, or was culminating, to this spring. And when the pandemic hit, we were in the last stages of releasing the third and final single of our record, Alignments. And then, of course, everything shut down. I'm pretty sure it came out like the week before the big shutdown happened. So it was, thankfully, we got it off. But, everything else that we were doing related to that record has it didn't hit a hard stop. It just had a big tilt in terms of what we wanted to do and how we were doing things. So, it's still been business as usual for us, just in a different way. A musician's life is never bored. We can write songs, or we can create, marketing ideas, or just things like that. So we've kind of had to pivot on what we were doing internally outside of the record release, but also, in what we were doing with the record release.
Yeah, that makes sense. Brock, did you guys have, you guys had a pretty full performing schedule too, I guess, eh? What, right before this hit?
Yeah, I mean, not just at the usual clubs and bars and for us, nerd and comic conventions where our band tends to thrive. But one of the big, difficulties was the school program is still near and dear to the hearts of Ian and I. So, of course, because there's closed bars and all those like public gatherings, schools are also hit, and they were getting hit with slashed funding and everything else. So it's really kind of been difficult for maybe our band specifically, where the two areas we would tend to focus on building that schedule have both sort of hit big obstacles that, I don't even know if the schools are any closer to figuring out the new day to day,
Yeah, we're, from a school teacher's point of view here, I have no idea. We're still waiting to hear. I don't know what my music program is going to look like in September, so we'll see. But all right, it's been interesting for sure. So I'd like to, because I've known you guys for quite a long time, and full disclosure to listeners, I have had Brock and Ian in for the school program on several occasions, and it's been great. But let's give everybody a little bit of history and background for you guys. So, how you met, when you made the decision that this is it, music's going to be your life, your careers. Why don't you just talk about that for a little while?
I would say that for me, like, to maybe just unpack that bit by bit, how Ian and I met was we were in two different bands, but it was sort of the thing where we like doing show swaps. I came from Brockville. Ian grew up in the Ottawa area, and that's where our bands were operating under. So that's really short drive and a good way for bands to kind of like gradually expand the perimeter. So we just got along really well. And when it came time to like, at a certain point, it became like each of our bands were missing the members that would complete the other. In so many ways, it was like Ian and his drummer kind of joined the outfit that would eventually become Double Experience, but that was Double Experience formed in 2014, but Ian and I have been playing music since 2011.
Okay. And Ian, do you have anything else you want to add to that about?
Yeah, it was just community based, and I think Brock and I when we would play shows together, we were on the same page on a lot of things. And it just, I mean, apart from the members themselves, just the personalities made sense to, create music together. And it's been a beautiful journey ever since.
Yeah, because you guys have been together for a long time. I was thinking back to how young you were the first time I had you in at the school. Like that's pretty wild. So, okay, great. Do you want to talk a little bit more about those school shows? Because that was a really interesting experience. Every time I've had you in, I've always been interested in what you guys have to say about the music business and what you guys talk about during those shows. So, do you want to address that a little bit for me?
Um, the school program was something kind of that launched in like 2009 or 10. And that was right exactly when I was finishing high school. And talking to my parents, it was basically like, I want to be in a band. And then they said, being in a band isn't a real job. And if you could prove to us that it is, maybe we would actually kind of, see through some, some more support than a pat on the head kind of thing. So by having to like basically draw up a business plan that explained to them, how it wasn't just, some pipe dream, but something that I believe could have been a career. That was the whole foundation of, man, I'll just thinking a lot of kids should at least be armed with this, whether they, I'm not saying everyone should be a musician, but if those who want to, sometimes you need more than that gut feeling or that, and it might be a strong feeling, but yeah, I had to learn that that's not enough to maybe make believers out of other people too. So that was, starting in 2010, we then booked our cross Canada tours on the simple fact that, what are we going to do if we're playing bars at nighttime? Like we were wasting a whole other day. So by kind of joining those two ideas together, we could do schools in the day, shows at night, and do a lot of our learning really quickly. So those early years of doing the school program by day and shows by night, lifting your own gear 4 times a day, that was like, it jump started a lot of the hard learning that, and Ian has always like he kind of coined the phrase of like, every lesson you learn in the music industry is usually an expensive one. And sometimes those are human costs. Sometimes those are just real money. So as we kept doing, like balancing these two areas, we just realized that we ourselves were learning so much that we, it was invaluable to us to like make that a part of our identity, I guess.
Yeah, I remember when I think like it was right around 2010 when I first had you guys in too, and I remember helping you guys unload Graham's station wagon there, and that was pretty awesome. So, so now that's one thing that I also wanted to talk to you about, because people, you always get that answer, right? Well, what's your real job going to be when you're a musician? But Ian, do you want to talk about maybe all the parts of how you guys have made a job out of this? Because that's always been, for me, what I was most impressed with is how hard you guys work and how you've managed to take all these different things and forge a career path out of it. So I'll let you talk about that for a little while.
Sure. I mean, Brock and I, colloquially between us, we've always said we're in the empire business, if you will. And for us, that meant being in control of our destiny as musical entrepreneurs. I think for a long time we said we were businessmen who played music, not necessarily musicians. And depending on what hat we're wearing on a certain day, you might get a different answer to the same question. But, like Brock and I, we work together as musicians in a band called Double Experience. Brock's got a company called Colfax that we both work at. And what Colfax is like a music label and management company. So on that side of things, we deal with management consulting. So working with artists on like record releases, song releases, so we'll go, hey, what's the plan for this song? And take it from, well, we have a finished copy to now it's out, now it's been recorded and out on Spotify. And what's the plan to get from step A to step release? And that's been a big thing. Of course, being a musician, right? We write songs. Brock and I have kind of been in charge of a song a week as creators. So at the end of the year, hopefully we've got 100 songs to choose from for moving forward on a next record. And then, we've done the live touring thing. I think Brock and I together have been playing, I think we've played over 1,000 shows, something like that, 700, 1,000, depending on, how we count, maybe some summer gigs, things like that. And then, we've toured the world, and that's been amazing. We've been to 17 plus countries. I think at this point we've lost track. So, it's been an incredible journey. I think all of those come together because that's really important, right? It comes down to, it's not like you go to the bank and you get a banker's salary and that's kind of it. For musicians, is there songs on the radio? Is there streaming coming in? Are you playing live? And I think we looked at that very early on and said, well, if we're going to do this full time, we need to take advantage of all the things that are going to, keep the heat on, the air conditioning going, and everything in between.
It's almost like one of those things where, and to Ian's point of these like multiple income streams, most of them are passive, but they require a fair amount of work to get started. Like you can't just automatically be getting the Spotify plays or the radio plays that you need. But once they do start coming, they're good to maybe alleviate some gaps where, pandemics hit.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously, now in the days of streaming, I mean, you really can't rely on it like in the old days on album sales for, head to the studio, cut an album and just tour to support the album. Those days are pretty gone. So give me maybe a tour highlight from each of you, something that, was your favorite moment on tour, or maybe someone you met on tour that really stood out for you. So, go ahead.
I think fairly recently, and I hope I don't take Ian's answer from this, because for me, like every time we get to see a new place, like it's usually a place I would have never thought I would be in. Like I have no reason to be in Poland, even if I was like a backpacker. Like, some people maybe would fly into a big popular European city and then they would take from, the airport to the hotel to the tourist traps, and then they leave. But Ian and I really get to see the back roads, the parts of town that tourists wouldn't be caught dead in. And then because of that, meeting all the people that we've met on these tours is something that has changed me profoundly, because it isn't just this surface level, Ian and I have been to 17 countries. Like we have, had to argue about parking and getting paid by promoters and all this stuff. And, it's like we're working on a different dictionary of, tourist terms to the local language. So yeah, for me, and that recent European tour we did with, we were supporting 2 bands. That was again, going back to this learning, a lot of learning quickly. That was our really first, experience with, a sort of a side of the industry that had eluded us, because most of the tours up until the 2018 Europe tour were our own headliners, just forging a path on our own. And this was supporting, a well-established act and all the trimmings that go with that.
Oh, cool. All right, Ian, what about you?
Yeah, I don't think, as a kid, my dad used to travel a lot for work, and his thing, he'd go to Dallas or he'd go to Florida or he'd be in Copenhagen, something like that, right? And he would come back, and I'd always be like, 7, 8-year-old kid just being like, hey dad, what was it like? And he would say, the airport hotel was great, thank you. And then that was basically all he saw. So yeah, I think, to build on what Brock was saying, we have been truly blessed, I guess, to just be able to see cities, towns from the eye view of people who are there. When we show up at any venue, typically we'll try and sync up with the local bands and we'll say, hey, is there a good place to eat? Is there, what should we see if we're in your town for 2 hours? And, I think that's, you can't put a price on that. We've had some amazing experiences. We drove through the Alps in the middle of winter, and that was something unbelievable. We drove through the Spanish desert in the middle of a heat wave in July, and that was with no water for any, paying €20 for a thing of water. We've seen the elements. We've seen, open air festivals to, tens of thousands of people, and, the broom closets in between. And I think, every single one of those moments has been priceless. And I think when you get to a level in a career like us, when we've done so many shows, it really is hard to pick something out as the defining moment. But I think every single one of those things has kind of added up to just one of the reasons we love going on the road, is because it's something new every single day.
Oh, excellent. Well, this looks like a good time for me to put a break in. So we'll take a pause and we'll be right back with Double Experience, Brock Tinsley and Ian Nichols. So let's take our music history moment. Let's go back in time all the way to June 29th, 1956. On June 29th, 1956, Elvis Presley appeared on The Steve Allen Show singing his hit song, Hound Dog. A month earlier, Elvis had sang the same song on The Milton Berle Show, and that performance generated controversy due to his movements on stage. The producers of The Steve Allen Show wanted to avoid similar complaints, so they had Elvis dress in a tuxedo and sing the same song to a hound dog who was sitting on a stool. Elvis was mortified during this live TV appearance and couldn't wait to be finished. And now, let's get back to the show. Okay, we're back with Brock Tinsley and Ian Nichols from Double Experience. I love your tagline on Facebook, Nerdy Rock from the 613. That's the best. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about that because I know you do have some association with video games. I'll let you talk about that and the Halo thing and all that stuff because that's really cool. So whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Well, so going back to like the lessons we learned, I mean, one of them was people don't care when you lead with "we're the best band you've never heard." Like, I think there's like a million bands with that current tagline, and we were after doing the first recording Ian and I did an EP called One Big Quicksand. We met a manager type, and he was like, "I listened to your whole EP, and like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what you are." And in trying to get to know us, you know, he was like, what do you guys do? And we were like, oh, we played Diablo like 18 hours a day. And we were actually playing before we came to this meeting. And he's like, you guys just sound like dorks. And then we all at the table, we kind of thought, it's like, I wonder what like a band who just exclusively had that worldview would sound like. And we were all just like, that meeting rocked my world. Cause I was like, oh, I don't have to try and convince people we're the best band they've ever heard. I just have to convince them we're the nerdiest band they've heard. And then when I meet that expectation, we can be that band firmly, as opposed to, you know, let them decide if it's good or bad later. But I can handle making my music nerdy because to Ian and I, that is our truth. Like, we're not, you know, going to the club 7 nights a week and, you know, like being party animals. Like, you will find us sitting at home, you know, drinking tea and playing video games. Like, so writing songs in that voice is like so much more authentic to us than like the rock and roll tropes that have been persisting for like, you know, 40 years.
Right on. Ian, maybe I'll get you to talk about the song that you guys wrote for the video game. Was it for Diablo or was it for Halo? I can't remember, but
It was for a video game called Destiny, which I mean, you mentioned
right.
Halo by the guys who made the original Halo. I mean,
Okay.
you know, I remember when the Xbox launched and Halo was like the big thing, and then you know they snuck Destiny posters into the later Halo games to tease what was coming next. And you know, when Destiny launched, I think Brock played a whole lot of it, and then he was like, "Dude, like you have to play this game. Like it's changed everything." You know, once again, Bungie changes the game, and so I bought a PlayStation. We started playing, and I fell in love with this game just as much as Brock had. And you know, Brock says 18 hours a day playing Diablo. Well, that turned into 18 hours a day playing Destiny. So you know, we fell in love with this game. We fell in love with the environment and the atmosphere and the history that they built into this universe. And so we wrote a song called The Glimmer Shot. And through that song, it reached the Destiny community. You know, it kind of exploded inside the community. It was like our first viral hit, if you want to use that term. And you know, because of that, we got to go down to a Destiny convention in Florida. We did that 2 years in a row, and we played, you know, the song, and we had a concert there. And we got involved with like a Destiny clothing company, and you know, to this day, like our we've since released another Destiny song as well. And to this day, both of those Destiny songs do really well in the community. And kind of anytime that Brock and I post on community forums, they're like, hey, aren't you guys the guys who did the Glimmer Shot? Or aren't you guys the guys who did Oh Listener Mine? So, it was an amazing experience to kind of connect with a community that we were like authentically part of. And, it's been an amazing ride so far.
And I think that's important because it's not like we sit here with like literally a list of 50 most popular nerdy pop culture things and just write songs about them. It's like, yeah, as I said, this is what Ian and I were so genuinely invested into this game that it was like, yeah, when you do an 18-hour session of gaming and then do a band practice, like it's on your mind. And then when it's like, hey, like write some lyrics or sing something, like you just sing about the video game. So like, yeah, it just happens, I can't explain it.
And was that one of those songs, you always hear stories of songs just coming together so quickly. Like on my episode I just released this morning, I was talking about Jagged Little Pill, and Glenn Ballard was talking about half of those songs. I mean, they just whipped out in an hour. And did Glimmer Shot come together really quickly like that? Was it one of those type of songs?
It did. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit I was in the shower when it happened. Singing into my loofah and everything else. And just, I had this chorus idea, and I think I got out of the shower soaking wet, and I had to just turn on my phone and like recorded the chorus. And then, next thing I knew, I just had this idea. And I think within like a day or two, like I had just written some stuff to support the song. And then I sat down with Brock within that week. And I think it was instant. We had this song, and we refined the lyrics and we refined everything, but the meat and potatoes of it were there really early on.
I remember that on the record that song was on, like every other song went through like so much second guessing and overthought and a lot of like, just going around and around trying to make sure, to the point where maybe some of it was like overthought. But I do remember Glimmer Shot was the one song where we were like, it struck us like it's so simple but like straightforward, and yet it's about this really weird, like inaccessible in our opinion, the topic. And then lo and behold, it turns out that that was the shortest and simplest path to the hearts and minds of nerdy rock fans everywhere.
Well, and then it was weird because it almost became this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like it did really well on streaming, and you could see the numbers on Spotify racking up, and then all of a sudden, radio stations who have nothing to do with video games, who don't have audiences who are necessarily interested in video games, take this video game song because it's the most popular song, and now it's on radio waves in Canada and the States and overseas and stuff. And it's kind of funny that this song that we just thought was like a love song to this video game that we loved somehow resonates with so many other people who may or may not even know it has something to do with Destiny. So that's been kind of like this really cool secondary experience beyond getting to be involved with this community that we owns our minds anyways.
Oh, excellent. In a minute, we're going to be talking about your new album, Alignments. But I wanted to tell you, I listened to a bunch of songs from the album. And it's going to be great for anybody who decides to buy that album. I love your videos too, and I really like the retro ones. I sent Brock a message through Instagram. Born for It. That video just totally brought me back to high school. Junior high, running home to turn on Much Music, and that was hilarious. And I just wanted to tell you, my first ever band trip as a high school music director was to Toronto. And man, that had to be like maybe 98, 99. Like it was that far back. And we toured Much Music studios in Toronto. And man, the girls thought George Stroumboulopoulos was the hottest thing. It was hilarious, like very, very funny. But I love your videos. Especially that one just totally brought me back. It was great. But do you want to talk about Alignments and what went into that album and how that people can get that album if they're interested in purchasing? And I'll let you guys take it over now.
It was our first release on the German label Drakkar, who again we were kind of courting them and talking for them for years because our band really recognized that it's this catch-22 of like, it's still we still feel like it's important to, you know, release music in a way that people understand. I mean, you're talking to the band that tried to do music on trading cards, and you know, so it was one of those things where we were looking for a label who kind of understood that we're weird, but we don't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel if they know how to make things go fast. So Drakkar was super. Just allowed us to be like, make the record you want, and we'll release it in a way that it does something new. And the alignments concept, which the long story short is, it's just like a nerd horoscope, you know, but it's like it's based in Dungeons and Dragons. We have this ability to chop the album in three, because there's you know, the good, neutral, and evil axis of the alignment system. And it was really just sort of like a way for us to kind of bridge the gap between the old industry and what we felt the new industry could be, with, you know, more regular releases and things like that. So for us, it was a bit of a perfect storm of, we've always wanted to do a conceptual record, because we recognized pretty early that if it's just 9 songs on a CD, I mean, again, going back to my point of like, I don't know how to market that, but I am passionate about how to market something that is for, you know, those in the know kind of thing. And that's what alignments represented to us, where it's not songs about rolling dice per se, but it's it deals with concepts that would be very familiar to those who play tabletop games.
Excellent. For your videos, I have to ask, because I love, like I said, I love the variety in your videos too. You know, AI freaks me out. I mean, that's total max headroom there. So who comes up with those ideas? Who's the more retro of the two of you, or is it a kind of dual decision? Like, how do you come up with all those ideas for your videos? Because I love them. They're hilarious. So
I would say that even the Max Headroom video was like almost like a snap decision. Like, if anything, like, I had this idea for Ian to be like, yo, we should do a video where it's like someone's at a psychiatrist's office, and like the classic psychiatrist chair, and turns out the guy thinks he's a robot, but the psychiatrist is, and then it just got complicated. And then I honestly don't know how it came up, but it's like, yo, what if Ian just dyed his hair blonde and was Max Headroom? And then we were just like, okay, went to First Choice, came back home, made the video, and it was like, it was a very similar thing with Born for It. I don't know what the video concept was, but we were just like, what if we just had, like, you know, the song has this like youthful element to it. It's like, let's just get someone with a tennis racket guitar, just like I learned on, and just let him rock out, and that's the video, you know. So I think Ian and I play off each other really well, and we, similar to our songwriting, the videos are always like a process of like just iterating on ideas until we ultimately circle back on, you know, keep it simple, stupid, and just, yeah, like, again, Ian and I kind of grew up after the, you know, things of like what you were saying, like the heyday of MTV and the heyday of Max Headroom, and, you know, even born after videos like Misery that we parodied. But yeah, for us, it's like, but I have vivid memories of, just like being glued to the television and seeing all these reruns.
Where can people get alignments from? If someone wants to purchase that album, just let us know how to do that.
So, I mean, you can go to www.2xexperience.com, which is our website. And there's kind of links anywhere in the world, depending on where you are. We've got an online store, and if you happen to be international, there's links where you can get them as well. We're on every streaming service. You know, if you're a Spotify user, which happens to be the big one in North America, you know, we're on Spotify. We're basically anywhere that music exists at this point. I think you can get your hands on alignments.
Excellent. Because you guys have been around for a little while now, I wanted to talk to you about what you've seen. What are the big changes in the music industry since you first started out? Because I think, you know, back probably in 2010, 2009, 2010, was streaming even a thing back then? Had that started yet? So maybe if you want to talk about that.
I mean, you know, I remember working with Brock early on, you know, and I remember, like, even when I started working with him, he'd already been doing the school program. But even then, in 2011, 2012, we were going into schools saying, you might not know it yet, but there's this thing called streaming, and it's coming.
Mhm.
You don't own it. You're just going to pay a subscription fee, and you'll have all the music in the world. And the students and it would just be like, no, like, I want a CD. Like, why would I want to stream anything, you know?
Yeah, we would like bill it as like, think Netflix but for music, and kids were like, that will never work. Like,
Yeah.
no one's
Yeah.
gonna do that. And yeah, I wouldn't say we were like, like Nostradamus out here, like prophesizing changes, but we definitely kind of saw the writing on the wall. And we've seen basically, like the audience have to come to grips with something that, I mean, and even now, like Ian and I attend music industry conferences, and the things and concepts they talk about, like virtual concerts,
Yeah.
and John Mayer's in a green screen soundstage and live casting, to 10 sold out venues, like real venues. And like I tell those stories to people, like it's coming, and people are like, no one's gonna watch like live streamed concerts. And a pandemic hit, and now everyone's like, I'm watching live stream concerts now. So
Yeah, I
it's
think
just,
it's part of the culture now for sure, after
oh
this
yeah.
especially. Um, excellent. And I wanted to, a couple more things here. Are you guys ready to do the Stewie Tunes quiz? Are you ready for this? That's right. Okay, I'm going to pull up the questions here. So, who wants to go first? Okay.
Okay, lay it on me. Why not?
Yeah, you want to go first, Ian? Okay. So,
Okay.
we'll do each question like one at a time. I'll ask you, and then I'll ask Brock. Okay.
Okay.
So, favorite Beatle. Who's your favorite Beatle? You can
George Harrison.
And why? That's mine too, by the way.
Why? So when I first started as a guitar player, and I wanted to, like, play rock and roll and like Led Zeppelin and everything else. But my guitar teacher, he had a background in education, and he said, we'll get to Zeppelin, but you don't get Zeppelin until you understand the Beatles. And I think the first songs I ever learned were just all the songs off of, what was the record? Please Please Me, I think was the Beatles record. And I don't know, I fell in love with the guitar playing on that record, and it was dead simple, right? But it was the simplicity, I think, that really spoke to me, because I wanted to just shred and, like, play guitar solos left, right, and center. But it was something just so beautiful about really simplistic melodies, really simplistic chords. And I found that, like, it spoke to me as a young budding guitar player, as I don't need to be fancy to be a good guitar player. I just need to understand the basics, because it was obvious to me that, and I was told at the time as well, that George Harrison understood the basics. And I think, that's why he was always my favorite Beatle.
All right. Brock, what about you?
Favorite Beatle is Paul McCartney.
Yeah, why is that?
One of my, I guess, like, quick pastimes is, like, I love, like, the history of, like, famous records, like, at least, especially now in Wikipedia. Like, used to be, you had to, like, wait for VH1 behind the music to, like, see all this, but now Wikipedia, and typically these classic albums will have, like, dense anecdotes and stories of how it all came together. And lately, so that coupled with Ian and I's recent kick of, like, just trying to learn songwriting on YouTube, and like videos that will, like, explain a song, everyone always looks to the Beatles. And all of this is to say that I've discovered that Paul McCartney was like the music guy of the Beatles. Like, he was really like the creative, or at least could relay the information on a theoretical level. But I mean, he devised the fictional band for Sgt. Pepper. So he was kind of like that wacky, guys, we should do this. We should make a movie, and that speaks to me. I don't know why. So
He was also in Destiny.
Was he?
Yeah, he was.
He was hired by the composer, and Paul McCartney's like, he basically had a blank check to experiment with anything that he wanted. So, and I'm sure Paul was like, oh, I've never done a video game. So
Very cool. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So there you go, listeners to the Stewie Tunes show. Learned something new right there. What's the best live show you've ever attended or seen? So Ian, we'll go back to you. Best live show.
I mean, kind of continuing down that whole Led Zeppelin thing, it's a toss-up. So I saw I must have been 13 years old, and I saw Robert Plant and the Strange Sensations, I think is what they were called. And so he had, I mean, he had his own record as well, but he reimagined all these like Led Zeppelin songs. And I remember he had like a must have been a 20-minute rendition of Black Dog, and it had this really Eastern influenced like feel to it, and there's like a sitar solo, and so that was amazing, and it left a huge impression on me as a young kid. And then I think the other equal experience would be I was front row for a band called Them Crooked Vultures, which had John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin on bass. It had Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age on vocals, and then it had Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters and Nirvana on drums. So and they played their record front to back, and they jammed. It was like, I think the record was like a 50-minute record, and it was like a 2.5-hour concert because they riffed on everything and they improvised. And I mean, so getting to see, one, in my opinion, one of the greatest rock singers of all time, and then getting to see now who are arguably three of the greatest other rock and rollers of all time, in concerts. I think both of those have just had huge effects on me as a fan of music and as a creator and performer as well.
Excellent. Brock, what about you?
So there's this band that no one really knows, but they're called Coheed and Cambria. They're basically like a modern Rush, with sci-fi concept albums and all. And they did this like 4-night stint in New York City where they played their albums front to back. It was the first time they had done it, and as a fan, I didn't know what to expect, but the rooms were sold out every night. Again, this is a band that would die on radio by any other traditional music industry metric. They would have never even left their garage. And to see that this band was capable of selling out 4 nights in a row in New York City with, primarily on music that never even gets played on radio. I formed my first band when I came home from that trip. I was like, this is so doable that I thought it was all based on, going back to Ian's point of like outsmarting the Beatles. I was like, man, here's a band that, are probably, don't know their way around. I don't even know what, but they were just so different than what constituted as successful popular music that I was like, you could do anything. Excellent.
So for this next question, Ian, we'll go back to you. You don't need to explain why if you don't want, just so you don't get in too much trouble. This can be alive or dead, doesn't matter, but most overrated performer.
Most overrated performer.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh geez. I'm like drawing a blank. I don't know. Come back to me. I need to like sort my brain out here for a second. My ADHD is pinballing around the room.
Yeah, sure. I'll go. Okay, Brock, what about you?
I know this is heresy, but I'm going to say the Dave Matthews Band.
Okay.
And just to maybe buy Ian more time, I can quantify that a little bit more, but I go into it trying to get it, and I don't get it. Like I find that there's no hooks that like grab me. I'm sure they're, geniuses at the music theory part, but I can just listen to the Police to get that. I think, it's like I think of Dave Matthews Band, and I think of just like frat college guys who like dared to stray away from top radio and be like, yo, I found this like sick band. And it's almost like Fish or Grateful Dead or something, but somehow Dave Matthews Band have convinced people that they're that band. So I'm probably gonna get my ass kicked for saying that, but
all right.
Yeah,
awesome.
This also might be heresy. I mean, I love him as an artist, but I think as a performer, I'm gonna get it for this one. But I honestly, I think Eric Clapton might be one of the most overrated. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna get it for sure.
Brock's jaws hit the floor here. I think he's a great guitar player, but I remember watching a lot of his videos when I was younger, and just like I get it, like you're great at guitar, like I get it, There's a whole other bunch of guys that might fall into that zone. I mean, Joe Satriani and Steve Vai for all the great things that they did, or like Yngwie Malmsteen. Like, great, you're all great guitar players, but like I want something more. And I Clapton as an artist, yeah, like great artist, but I always found like I wanted more when I would see his performances.
All right, interesting answers, guys. What about this next question? Who's the most underappreciated or unknown performer that you think everybody should know about? So, do you want to take that first, Ian? Or
yeah, okay. So now talking about other guitar players, I'll go with underappreciated as opposed to maybe unknown. This is going to sound like he's very appreciated, but I always found Brian May was underappreciated as a guitar player. I always
not
found
anymore, though.
Well, not. Well, I think recently he was just named like number one or something. But for years, like growing up with like in circles of guitar players, they'd be like, I want to be like Hendrix or I want to be Jimmy Page, and no one ever was saying I want to be Brian May of Queen. Like I always found like Queen were a band that for everything they did, like it was always, I want to be Zeppelin. I want to be the Rolling Stones. It was never, I want to play in a band like Queen. And so again, like one of the biggest rock bands on earth, but I always found in comparison to like their peers, they were definitely underappreciated, especially for the body of work that they delivered. So vast, so different, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit that took me by surprise when that survey came out and he was named number one. Wow, that was something else. All right, Brock, what about you?
For me, it's Andy Summers from The Police. Again, going on Ian's thing of like not unknown but underappreciated, because when you're in a band with every drummer cites Stuart Copeland, obviously. Sting is just a musical genius, as Ian and I had to discover playing in a Police tribute band briefly. And then there's Andy Summers. He's like very similar points to Ian, where he's not the fastest, he's not the flashiest. He just kind of had to fit in between the two egos of the other two as best he could. And it was even amazing to me, like having to like learn the material. Some of his chords that were jazzy were almost like lazy. He would do like these very like a one finger chord, and it's like, oh, it's an A6, just the way the guitar was like tuned. But he was almost like throw a bunch of effects on it, hit a note, and it fit. But it's like, how do you fit in between like an unstoppable force and an immovable object like the other two members of that band? But yeah, I always like having to learn that material. It made me be like, man, this guy is like actually an incredibly affluent guitar player, but just probably inhibited by the grand design of Sting and Stuart Copeland.
So I got to tell you, my brother-in-law is a guitar collector, and his guitar collection looks like a museum. I mean, there's probably well over 100 now. It's amazing. But I got to play one of Andy Summers' guitars a few years ago, so that was kind of cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. His collection is unbelievable. Like, it's wild. Okay, last question on the quiz here. So if you could have a dinner party and invite any one musician, or we'll say band, over for dinner, who would it be? Like, why would you want them over? So Ian, do you want to start that one, or?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a weird one, but or maybe obvious. I don't know, but Robert Johnson, I think I'd have to invite to my dinner party. So the modern founder of, rock and roll, blues, and I think only because there's so little of him on record, no one really knows what happened, to him. I know, I think it was like a bar fight or something that he ended up dying in, but it was like, I think I would just want to sit across from the table and be like, all right, did you do it? Did you sell your soul to the devil? Did you do it?
Yeah, that's such a great story.
Oh yeah. Unbelievable. Right. But like, I think I'd get this like eerie, response of, wow, he just like look at you in the eye as he tells you that story. And I think like just that moment alone, I think would just give me the creeps. Yes or no. Right.
Excellent. All right, Brock, what about you? Who's coming to your dinner party?
I think someone like Elvis would have been cool to hang out with. I mean, first of all, it'd be easy to feed him because peanut butter sandwiches are like that's like the staple of the tour diet. But yeah, I mean, that would be a great dinner guest. And Ian mentioned it with them Crooked Vultures earlier, but I guess like Josh Homme, the singer for Queens of the Stone Age, he's kind of like a ginger Elvis. So, and he's played with members of Led Zeppelin, members of Nirvana, members of the Stooges. So, in that sense, yeah, he would have crazy stories from a musician's perspective, because he's just such a prolific collaborator. But yeah, I think an Elvis type guest would be amazing.
You were speaking of the peanut butter sandwiches, and I remember reading somewhere that he used to use in the frying pan like a pound of butter for one sandwich. Like, it was wild. All right, thanks for answering the quiz, guys. Those are great answers. That just reveals so much about a person when you answer those type of questions, So I've been chatting with Brock Tinsley and Ian Nichols today from Double Experience. And guys, I really want to thank you for this. You've gone above and beyond today to take time talking with me, and it's been great talking to you. So we'll end the interview here. I'm going to hit record and stop recording, and then we can just chat after it's done. So thanks so much, guys. Much appreciated. So that was my talk with Brock and Ian from Double Experience. As you no doubt noticed during the interview, they're great guys, always approachable. They love what they're doing. And the other thing is they have really, really worked hard at their craft. And listen to their music, buy their album. You won't be disappointed. I'm so impressed every time I hear these guys play. I'm grateful to Brock and Ian for being my very first guests on the new format of the S2E2 show. And I'd also like to thank my good friend and musical partner Rick Denis for providing the music for today's episode. Don't forget to leave a rating or a review if you're enjoying the show, and please follow me on social media as well. If you know someone who you think might enjoy this show, please spread the word. That really helps independent podcasters like me reach a wider audience. In the meantime, stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the S2E2 Show. If you're enjoying this show, don't forget to click subscribe.